Behind the grand speeches and ceremonial handshakes, the history of U.S. presidents is laced with personal grudges, broken alliances, and bitter rivalries that shaped the nation in ways the public rarely saw. These weren't just mild disagreements over policy, they were deep, personal animosities that sometimes altered the course of elections, derailed legislation, and even shifted America's place in the world. From backroom betrayals to very public insults, these feuds reveal a side of the presidency that is raw, human, and often ruthless. Today, we'll walk through the corridors of power and revisit moments where political partnerships collapsed into open warfare, changing not only the men involved, but the history of the United States itself. They began as the ultimate political dream team, standing shoulder to shoulder in the fight for independence, drafting the Declaration together and bonding over philosophy while serving abroad in Europe. But by 1796, friendship gave way to rivalry. Adams won the presidency. Jefferson came in second. And under the Constitution at the time, he was forced into the awkward role of vice president to his opponent. By the election of 1800, the political knives were out. Jefferson's ally, pamphleteer James Callender, launched a vicious attack, branding Adams a hideous hermaphroditical character, while Adams' camp fired back, calling Jefferson mean-spirited and dangerous. The campaign was one of the nastiest in early American history, and Jefferson emerged the winner. Adams, refusing any public show of courtesy, slipped out of the Capitol at 4 a.m. on Inauguration Day without so much as a handshake. Their split was fueled by clashes over policy, most notably the Alien and Sedition Acts, and mutual suspicion of each other's political motives. For years, they exchanged no words at all. Only in the final stage of their lives did they begin a remarkable correspondence, reconciling just in time to share one last, dramatic connection. Both died on the 4th of July, 1826, exactly 50 years after the Declaration of Independence. The 1824 presidential race was a storm from the start. Andrew Jackson, the war hero of New Orleans, won both the popular vote and the most electoral votes but fell short of a majority. The decision went to the House of Representatives. There, Speaker Henry Clay threw his influence behind John Quincy Adams, who secured the presidency. Shortly afterward, Adams appointed Clay as Secretary of State, a move Jackson's supporters condemned as a corrupt bargain. The bitterness only deepened. In 1828, the rematch became one of the dirtiest campaigns in U.S. history. Jackson's opponents dredged up accusations of his violent temper and questioned his marriage, calling his beloved wife Rachel a bigamist. Adams was painted as an elitist who lived lavishly while Americans struggled. The attacks were relentless. Jackson ultimately won in a landslide, but the victory was hollowed by personal tragedy. Rachel died just weeks before he took office, a loss Jackson blamed squarely on the viciousness of Adams' campaign. Adding insult to injury, Adams mirrored his father's earlier act of defiance. He refused to attend Jackson's inauguration. Their rivalry not only marked a deeply personal feud but also fractured the old Democratic-Republican Party, paving the way for the two-party system that still dominates American politics today. The assassination of Abraham Lincoln in 1865 thrust Andrew Johnson into the presidency during one of the most turbulent periods in American history. Johnson favored a lenient Reconstruction policy toward the defeated Southern states, a stance that quickly put him at odds with many in Congress and with General Ulysses S. Grant, the Union's celebrated military leader. Grant leaned toward the radical Republicans' vision, a stricter Reconstruction and robust protection of rights for newly freed African Americans. Their relationship soured dramatically over the fate of Secretary of War Edwin Stanton. Johnson, eager to remove Stanton despite the Tenure of Office Act, asked Grant to serve as interim secretary. Grant agreed temporarily. When the Senate reinstated Stanton, Grant promptly stepped aside, returning the office to him. Johnson saw this as a betrayal and accused Grant of disobeying direct orders. Grant, in turn, fired back with a written rebuttal defending his actions and making their dispute public. By the time Johnson left office in 1869, their animosity was unbridgeable. True to the pattern of presidential grudges, Johnson refused to attend Grant's inauguration. Yet the feud's impact was felt beyond their personal dislike. As president, Grant vigorously used federal power to suppress the Ku Klux Klan and enforce civil rights laws policies that stood in stark contrast to Johnson's approach and helped shape the trajectory of Reconstruction. When Theodore Roosevelt handpicked William Howard Taft as his successor in 1908, it was out of deep personal trust and a belief that Taft would carry forward his progressive reforms. At first, the plan seemed sound. Taft was affable, respected, and loyal. But once in the Oval Office, Taft began drifting toward conservative policies, replacing many of Roosevelt's allies in key positions and softening the reformist agenda. The personal disappointment cut deep. By 1912, Roosevelt felt compelled to challenge Taft for the Republican nomination. The campaign turned vicious. Roosevelt mocked Taft as a flub-dub with a fat head and less brains than a guinea pig, while Taft shot back, calling Roosevelt a dangerous demagogue and a honeyfugler. Their war of words split the Republican Party in two. When the party sided with Taft, Roosevelt formed the Progressive Bull Moose Party, siphoning votes from his former friend. The result was disastrous for both Democrat Woodrow Wilson, swept to victory, and Taft carried only 2 states, marking one of the most humiliating defeats for a sitting president. The fracture between Roosevelt and Taft was more than political. It was the implosion of a close friendship, reshaping the Republican Party's identity for years to come. The backdrop was the Great Depression, and America was desperate for leadership. Herbert Hoover, weighed down by public blame for the economic collapse, viewed Franklin D. Roosevelt not just as an opponent, but as a dangerously unprincipled opportunist. He once derided FDR as a chameleon on plaid, a man who shifted his positions to suit the political winds. Roosevelt, in turn, dismissed Hoover as a fat, timid capon, implying weakness and indecision. After Roosevelt's landslide victory in November 1932, the nation faced a dangerous 4-month lame duck gap before his March inauguration. Banks were failing at an alarming rate. Hoover urged Roosevelt to publicly support his emergency measures to restore confidence, but FDR refused, unwilling to tie himself to Hoover's unpopular policies. The two men met, but their conversations were icy, each unwilling to bend. On Inauguration Day, they shared a silent, tense ride to the Capitol. Neither spoke much, and the air between them was thick with mutual disdain. Many historians believe this failure to cooperate during the transition worsened the banking crisis that greeted Roosevelt as he took office. Their mutual contempt was not just personal, it left a mark on one of the most perilous handovers of power in American history. Harry Truman once admired Dwight D. Eisenhower, even imagining the popular general might run for president as a Democrat. But by 1952, admiration had soured. Eisenhower, running as a Republican, distanced himself from Truman's administration, particularly when he failed to defend General George Marshall, a Truman ally, against Senator Joseph McCarthy's smears. To Truman, this wasn't just political maneuvering, it was a moral failure. During the transition, tensions flared. Truman invited Eisenhower for the customary pre-inauguration coffee at the White House. But Eisenhower declined. The refusal stung. Truman's private notes dripped with disdain, once remarking that Ike knows more about politics than a pig knows about Sunday. Their strained relationship bled into policy matters, slowing communication at a time when the Korean War still raged. On Inauguration Day in January 1953, the two men maintained a polite facade, but the handshake was stiff, the smiles forced. For years afterward, Truman criticized Eisenhower's presidency, while Eisenhower returned the favor with cool indifference. Their feud was a reminder that even wartime heroes and seasoned politicians can clash bitterly when pride and principle collide. If Truman's dislike for Eisenhower was cold, his contempt for Richard Nixon was scorching. Truman viewed Nixon as the embodiment of political dishonesty, a man who rose to power through smear campaigns and calculated fear-mongering about communism. He famously called Nixon a no-good lying bastard, and even said that anyone who voted for him ought to go to hell. Their hostility dated back to Nixon's time in Congress, when he made a name for himself by aggressively pursuing alleged communists, often with flimsy evidence. Truman saw this as opportunism at its worst, a distortion of democratic values. The animosity never faded. When the Watergate scandal exploded years later, Truman, long retired, didn't publicly gloat, but those close to him said he felt grim vindication. In his eyes, Nixon's downfall was inevitable, the natural result of a career built on deception. It was one of the most deeply personal grudges a former president ever held against a sitting one. When John F. Kennedy chose Lyndon B. Johnson as his running mate in 1960, it wasn't out of affection, it was a calculated move to win Southern votes. Johnson, a seasoned Senate power broker, suddenly found himself in the shadow of the glamorous Kennedy family. Within the White House, he was often treated as an outsider, excluded from the inner circle, and looked down upon by JFK's advisors. The tension was amplified by Johnson's mutual loathing with Attorney General Robert Kennedy. Bobby saw Johnson as crude and manipulative. Johnson viewed Bobby as arrogant and self-righteous. Their clashes were frequent and sharp. After JFK's assassination in 1963, Johnson inherited the presidency, and with it, the full machinery of power. He moved swiftly to assert his dominance, sidelining many Kennedy loyalists and steering the administration in his own direction. In 1967, Johnson pushed for and signed an anti-nepotism law, widely seen as a direct strike at the Kennedy political machine. The rivalry between Johnson and the Kennedys was not just personal, it was a clash of political cultures. Texas hardball against East Coast aristocracy, and neither side forgot the wounds. In the final months of Johnson's presidency, the Vietnam War dominated everything. Determined to secure a legacy beyond the war's shadow, Johnson pushed hard for peace talks in Paris. By late 1968, there were signs of progress until reports surfaced that Nixon's campaign was quietly urging South Vietnam to stall negotiations, promising them a better deal if he won the presidency. Johnson, monitoring communications through intelligence channels, was furious. He saw Nixon's interference as not just political sabotage, but outright betrayal of the country's interests, calling it treason in private conversations. Yet, bound by the need to protect sensitive intelligence methods, Johnson stopped short of going public. When Nixon won, the transition between the two men was frosty at best. Johnson hosted Nixon at his Texas ranch, where the handshake was stiff, the conversation polite but hollow. The trust was gone before Nixon even took the oath, and the shadow of that alleged interference lingered over their relationship for the rest of Johnson's life. Jimmy Carter was meticulous, detail-driven, and deeply involved in policy. Ronald Reagan projected an easy confidence, favoring broad vision over granular control. Their personalities and governing styles could not have been more different, and the tension between them became evident even before Reagan took office. During the transition after the 1980 election, Reagan showed little interest in Carter's exhaustive briefings. Carter, still managing the delicate Iran hostage crisis, grew frustrated when Reagan seemed more focused on symbolic gestures than on the complex details of diplomacy. Adding to the strain, First Lady-to-be Nancy Reagan requested to move into the White House early to redecorate, a request Carter flatly denied. The ultimate sting came on Inauguration Day, the 20th of January, 1981. As Reagan delivered his address, the 52 American hostages in Tehran were released just minutes after he took the oath. For Carter, who had spent months negotiating their freedom, it felt like a final insult. Though both men remained outwardly civil in later years, their relationship never warmed, and Carter privately viewed Reagan's style as dangerously simplistic. Their feud began long before they were political rivals. As a private citizen, Donald Trump became one of the loudest voices promoting the birther conspiracy theory, falsely claiming that Barack Obama had been born outside the United States and was therefore ineligible to be president. Obama publicly mocked Trump at the 2011 White House Correspondents' Dinner, delivering cutting jokes while Trump sat stone-faced a moment many believe planted the seed for Trump's eventual run for the presidency. When Trump won in 2016, he moved quickly to dismantle key parts of Obama's legacy. He sought to weaken the Affordable Care Act, withdrew the U.S. from the Paris Climate Agreement, and abandoned the Iran nuclear deal. The animosity only escalated when Trump accused Obama without evidence of spying on his 2016 campaign. Obama, breaking the tradition of former presidents avoiding direct criticism, condemned Trump's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic as an absolute chaotic disaster. Trump, in turn, refused to follow another tradition. He never invited Obama back to the White House for the customary unveiling of his official portrait. The relationship became one of the most openly hostile between two modern presidents, and the bitterness shows no sign of fading. The 2020 presidential race was marked by a level of animosity rarely seen in modern politics. Donald Trump branded Joe Biden Sleepy Joe, questioning his mental sharpness and fitness for office. Biden countered by calling Trump the worst president America has ever had, attacking both his leadership and his character. When Biden won both the popular vote and the Electoral College, Trump refused to concede. His legal team launched a flurry of lawsuits, all aimed at overturning the results, while he repeatedly claimed without evidence that the election had been stolen. The dispute reached its climax on the 6th of January, 2021, when a mob of Trump supporters stormed the U.S. Capitol, disrupting the certification of Biden's victory. 2 weeks later, in a historic break from tradition, Trump skipped Biden's inauguration, making him the first outgoing president in 152 years to refuse attendance. For both men, the feud became more than political rivalry. It transformed into a mutual belief that the other posed a grave threat to the future of American democracy. While they publicly projected a strong partnership during Obama's presidency, there were moments of private tension. Obama respected Biden's decades of experience, but occasionally questioned his political instincts. Before Biden committed to running in 2020, Obama reportedly advised him, "You don't have to do this, Joe," hinting at doubts about whether Biden was the right person for the moment. During the 2020 primaries, Obama stayed notably quiet, only endorsing Biden after he had effectively secured the nomination. Some insiders interpreted this as a sign that Obama had been skeptical of Biden's chances from the start. Later, a remark attributed to Obama leaked into the press, "Don't underestimate Joe's ability to mess things up." Still, their relationship was layered. Biden cherished his role as Obama's vice president, and Obama valued Biden's loyalty and connection to working-class voters. Yet beneath the warmth were strategic differences and occasional frustrations, proof that even the most celebrated political partnerships have fault lines invisible to the public eye. These rivalries weren't just about bruised egos or petty insults. They often reshaped political parties, altered the course of wars, and changed the legislative priorities of entire administrations. From whispered betrayals in the early republic to Twitter feuds in the digital age, presidential grudges have been as much a part of American history as the Constitution itself. They remind us that behind the marble monuments and formal portraits, presidents are still human, capable of loyalty and friendship, but also of deep resentment and lasting enmity. And sometimes, those personal battles ripple far beyond the individuals involved, steering the fate of the nation in unexpected ways. What do you think of these presidential rivalries? Do you think any of them still affect politics today? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed learning about these intense feuds, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more fascinating historical stories. We'll be diving into even more untold tales from the White House, stories of power, betrayal, and the people behind the politics. Stay tuned, and we'll see you in the next video. Subscribe now to get the inside scoop on the presidents you never knew could hate each other.